It's not through being healed that you heal, it's through being triggered. Triggers are the doorway to healing. Another quote that I've heard recently is, if you think you're enlightened, go spend 1 week with your family. It's going to dismantle that identity, and that can be very scary for you. But that also reveals exactly the problem. And the problem is that you have turned the process of healing into an identity. But trauma teaches you that that fake connection is the only option. But healing means showing yourself that you actually don't need that fake connection to survive, and not settling for anything other than real connection. Real connection happens when two people are being authentic together. Your only job is to be yourself. You are not responsible for anyone else's emotions. Boundaries exist to serve connection, not to block it.
Welcome back to Talk the Walk, where we explore how to walk your journey of healing, growth, and transformation with more success, ease, and joy.
The holidays are here, and for many people, holidays mean spending a lot of time with their family. And also for many people, just the thought of going back to their families and spending time with them already starts creating some tension in your body and anxiety coming up. So where could that be coming from? What's happening there? So what's happening there is that for most of us who have been doing this work of healing, self-discovery, growth, transformation, as we're doing this work, we have started to realize that most of the patterns in ourselves that we're trying to transform, that we're growing from, that often block us or harm us, they were created through our early experiences with our family, of course. And that's a big part of the work that we've been doing has been to undo those patterns and heal from that and let go of those traumas that were created there. And so you've been doing all this work, and the thought of going back to that original environment where the same dynamics still exist and the same kind of reactions and the same triggers for you can be quite scary, because it can mean bringing you back again to those patterns that you've been working so hard to let go and heal and transform. Because probably inside of you, you know that if you have been having yourself some distance from your family, it means that that distance has been supporting your healing, at least in the early stages. And so returning feels like a regression, because it will be like going back to the same original environment where all the same triggers will be there for you, and they will just bring you back right to the same old patterns. Because you probably know very well that your family knows how to trigger you best than anyone else. I've recently heard this quote that your family knows best how to push your buttons because they're the ones who install them. And that's why it's so easy for family to trigger each other. But what if they were the ones who installed those buttons? Doesn't that mean that they're not your buttons, it's their buttons? And isn't it time to give them back the buttons? So let's talk about this. This fear makes sense. This fear is not irrational. It's normal. It's tied to real historical patterns where when you are with them, you do go back to those patterns. There are those family dynamics that you don't like that bring you back those triggers. And so it's just normal that you already feel some tension in your body, that you don't want to go there. You don't want to be back there. I mean, you probably want to be with your family, of course, and have that connection, but you don't want to be back in those dynamics. And in this video, I want to talk to you about how you can navigate those dynamics in a way that you can still maintain the connection while having your own inner well-being and peace. So let's talk about that. When someone says that they're afraid of losing their progress if they go back to their family, what do you think that they're really afraid of? What are they really afraid of losing? So Of course that on the surface level, it is losing their progress. You're afraid of losing your progress so far, of going back to the same triggers, going back to the same patterns. But there's a deeper layer there. And that's the layer of, often as people are doing this healing work, this growth work, they start to form a new identity for themselves, this identity of being healed. And this identity becomes very important for you because now you are a healed person. You no longer have those triggers, those old patterns and healthy dynamics. Now you're healed. And so going back to your family and being triggered again and going back into those same old patterns and dynamics yourself, it's a big threat to that new identity that you're so hard working for and that you're clinging to. It's going to dismantle that identity, and that can be very scary for you. But that also reveals exactly the problem. And the problem is that you have turned the process of healing into an identity. And a lot of people do that. I see a lot of people who come to our courses who have done that. They turn the process of healing into their identity. And every time that I see that, I always observe how when they do that, their process of healing slows down or even stagnates. Because healing is a process. And when you turn it into an identity, which is something solid and moving and static, then the process stops because you cannot continue to heal. Because healing, if you think about your healing so far, the way that you have healed, it was by working with your triggers and your patterns. So you are triggered and you work with them and you transform them and you heal them through being triggered. It's not through being healed that you heal. It's through being triggered. Once you get yourself into that identity ego of now I'm healed, then to maintain that identity, you have to stop allowing yourself to be triggered, to go into your triggers, and that means you have to stop healing. And that's how healing stagnates. But people often get this identity as it's also actually a defense mechanism. It's an identity to cope and to help them avoid their difficult feelings. Oh no, I'm healed now. I don't need to be with my triggers anymore. And so it just becomes more avoidance, which is the opposite of healing. And often the fear of family, of going back to the family, is actually the fear of this identity collapsing. So you're going to have to let this identity collapse, because the truth is, this identity is not serving your healing. It's not serving your healing. It's keeping it stuck and stagnated. And the idea that triggers are the opposite of healing, it's also wrong. Triggers are the doorway to healing. And so allowing yourself to go into your triggers and allowing yourself to break that identity of I'm healed might be exactly what you need to grow and heal into your next level. And that's the first thing that I want to bring to your awareness, which is this. If you no longer needed to hold on to this identity of being healed, and if you were to see triggers not as failure of healing, but as the doorway to it, as the invitation to it, and if triggers didn't mean failure, but actually access to your next level of healing, if you could let go of this identity of being healed and actually return to the process of being healed, if you could remember that healing is a process, not an identity, how would this change your perspective on going back and being with your family in holidays or any other moment? How would that change that? How could you see this actually as an opportunity for you to heal into the next level, to grow into the next level? Could you welcome this? Could you go there thinking, oh, I'm actually going to use this as my doorway to my next level of healing. I've been healing so far. I've been doing all this work from a distance, and it was important, this early distance, for me to do the work, for me to heal. But now it's where the real test begins. It's really actually interesting. Another quote that I've heard recently is, if you think you're enlightened, go spend 1 week with your family, right? You'll very soon realize that you're not. So could you see it that way? Could you think of this? Okay, I've been doing this work it's been going great. I've been doing a lot of work, but now my next level is actually to welcome the next level of my triggers, which includes being with these people, being back in this environment, in these dynamics, and doing work and welcoming all those triggers and letting myself also heal even there. And if you can bring that perspective to you going back to your family, it's what's going to do all the difference. So the biggest fear that people have here is, okay, but if I do that, how can I do that work with those triggers next to my family without actually overwhelming myself or re-traumatizing myself? Because I don't want that to happen. And that's a very important question. So how do you actually do that without overwhelming or re-traumatizing yourself? And the answer is, the most important thing is just this mindset that I'm talking about. If you have the mindset of, I'm going to go and see this as an opportunity, and I'm going to welcome all triggers, I'm going to welcome all of my emotions, and I'm going to welcome them as an opportunity for me to even heal deeper, then you most likely will not overwhelm yourself or re-traumatize yourself, because overwhelm happens when you are resisting your emotions. Re-traumatizing happens when you make it not safe, make it unsafe for you to feel your triggered emotions. So actually, the thing that would create your overwhelm and your re-traumatization would be if you would go there thinking, oh my God, I cannot be triggered. I have to do everything I can to avoid being triggered, and I have to manage people around me. And if I'm triggered, it's really bad because it means I'm no longer healed. That would actually make you overwhelmed, because the emotions would come and you'd resist them, so they'll become stronger and overwhelm you. And your emotions would come and you'd be like, oh no, I shouldn't be feeling this. So you make them not safe inside of you, and that's what creates trauma. So that's the key answer to how not to overwhelm yourself and how not to re-traumatize yourself, is to be ready to welcome all of them. Welcome all emotions, and they will not overwhelm you. You will feel them for sure, but not in an overwhelming way where you lose yourself. And it will also not be re-traumatizing, because you are making it safe to feel them inside of you. Quite the opposite. It will be quite healing, because those emotions that are going to be triggered were the ones that were made unsafe through trauma, and now you're making them safe. You're being like, okay, it's safe to feel this anger, this frustration, this sadness, this grief, this shame, this guilt, whatever it is. We're going to talk more about that soon. But that's really the key here. With that said, I think it's very, very important to remember that if this is not in your growth zone at all right now, especially if you've been just starting your healing process and you definitely feel inside yourself that going back there right now is going to completely pull you out of your growth zone, I want you to remember that you don't have to do this. There's no reason why you should, for any reason, meet your family, other than expectations and cultural obligations, but those are not truth. Nothing obligates you to attend family gatherings. No cultural obligation is the truth. So it's up to you to have the discernment of where your growth zone is, and if it's going to be something within your growth zone or not. And if it's not, give yourself permission not to go. Or give yourself permission to go, and if you feel that it's not good for you to stay there, give yourself permission to leave as well. So this is a key here, and I'm going to talk about this soon. But often the only reason why people are still meeting their families, it's because there's this guilt that if they don't do it, they will be a bad family member. But it's up to you to choose that. And if it feels right not to go, then let that guilt be there. Welcome that guilt. You don't need to fight against the guilt. You can welcome it without buying its story. Just understanding that that guilt is there because it's exactly what was created during your trauma. Guilt was used to make you learn that you should always be with your family and be responsible for them and follow all the cultural rules and meet them. So it's there because it was the traumatized emotion, the emotion used for that. So you can welcome that guilt, but not buy the story anymore. And if it feels that it's not healthy for you to be with your family now, remember that there's never anything that forces you to go or to stay. Never. And that's the other thing that's important for you to have, because it restores your agency. And it restores something super important for navigating family dynamics in a healthy way, which is agency, which means if you are there, it's because you want to be there, not because you have no choice. And the truth is, for most people, you actually want to be there. There's usually a part of you that wants to have connection with your family, that wants to be with them, because it's your family, and we all are wired to see family as a source of connection and love. And probably you love them, so there's a part of you that wants to be there. However, there's also another part of you that doesn't want to be there, that doesn't want to go back to those dynamics and those triggers and those patterns. And so the key here is, how do you balance both of them? How do you balance that? And that's where the concept of boundaries comes up. To be able to balance connection in a healthy way, you need to have boundaries. So let's talk about that. And the key here is that there's like this core inner conflict, which is present, I would say, in virtually all human relationships, because humans want connection, they need connection, but we also want to be authentic, right? We need connection, but we also need authenticity, and we need our values and needs and ourselves to be respected. And often in relationships, there is a conflict between the two, between having the connection and being respected in our authenticity. And especially in family, very often being in family forces a choice between the two. I either am with them and I have that connection and I belong, or if I do that, I have to not be authentic and I have to not respect myself. Or I have to be authentic, but I can be authentic, but then I have no connection. I have to distance myself from them. And so this is pointing to a very important fact in connection, which is the fact that as children, we learn that to be connected, we need to stop being ourselves and having needs and being true to ourselves. And so we learn that this is the only form of connection. But if you really think about that, is that even connection? If you're not being authentic, if you're not being truly authentic, can you even call that connection? Because if you're not being authentic, if you're not being real, it's not real connection. It's some form of fake connection. So if you're looking for real connection, it means that actually stopping being authentic for having some form of semblance of connection, or fake connection in this case, it's actually not the right decision, because you're not having connection either way. It's just a fake feeling of connection. But trauma teaches you that that fake connection is the only option. But healing means showing yourself that you actually don't need that fake connection to survive, and not settling for anything other than real connection. And so this means that you're going to need to find a balance between your authenticity and connection with others. And that's where boundaries come in. So let's just make a key distinction here, very important distinction between connection and enmeshment. Connection and enmeshment. Real connection happens when two people are being authentic together. So they connect through their authenticity, through being real. And there's choice there. They choose to be together. They choose to connect with agency. That's true connection. On the other side, enmeshment is quite the opposite of connection. It's when two people or more people need to change themselves and are constantly managing themselves and the other person in order to stay connected. But it's not really connected, it's fake connection. In order to have that belonging, they are constantly changing themselves, managing themselves and managing the other person so that they can stay fakely connected. Falsely connected, of course. So that's enmeshment. That's the true difference between connection and enmeshment. Connection is authenticity, connected through authenticity and choice. And enmeshment is connection through inauthenticity, so not really connection, and through managing each other and managing ourselves, and the lack of choice. It's that feeling of I either do this or I don't survive or I don't have connection. And often in families, there's a lot of enmeshment where everyone is just managing each other and managing themselves to keep each other happy and keep that connection and keep the family functional, right? And that is actually the opposite of true connection. So if you want to have the true connection with your family, you're going to have to prioritize the authenticity and the choice there. And that can be scary, because when you do that, something very scary happens for you, which is, as we were talking about, guilt can show up very strongly when you start being authentic with your family, because being authentic means setting boundaries. Okay, so just a quick overview of boundaries here. This is another episode, but your boundaries are the limits that you put within yourself about what is right for you, what is not right for you, what you are willing to do and not willing to do. And it's always about making the connection more possible. So boundaries, their purpose, how the good boundaries, the way that they work is they help connection become more possible. They're not against connection, they help connection become more possible. But the real connection, because the purpose of boundaries is to protect your authenticity, your realness, your choice, your agency. And so as you start to do the healing process and you want to have that real connection, it will mean placing those boundaries. Also with your family, saying things, hey, this I like being like this, but if this happens, if you go into this pattern, that's not the line for me, and I will not be in connection in that way. I will withdraw. You always say what you will do in response to that. Boundaries are not about controlling the other person. It's about saying what you will do and what's a line for you and not a line for you, and then making that be respected. So when you start placing those boundaries, you have to know that you are doing that in service of the true connection. But it doesn't mean that your family or the other person will react how you would like them to react. And you have no control over that. And that's because your entire relationship until now has functioned based on enmeshment, based on managing yourself and managing each other. And so now you're coming up and you are bringing this change into the relationship. And of course, that's going to trigger them because they have been using that enmeshment and that management, that fake connection to also avoid their own emotions and their triggers. And so you coming and changing that's going to trigger them as well. And that's something that you need to expect and even welcome, because it's a sign that you're doing the right thing. And I know this is very hard. This is very hard because a lot of guilt shows up when you start setting boundaries with your family. And that's exactly the next step in your healing process, is to work with that guilt. That's your next trigger that you need to work with and heal. It's that guilt. So where is that guilt coming from? That guilt was learned, as we were talking about, through that emotional conditioning, where you learned as growing up as a child that in that family or in relationships, it's your job to caretake others, to be responsible for the emotions of others. Again, that is enmeshment. When people are caretaking each other and they're being responsible for the emotions of others and responsible for keeping everyone else happy and with that not being triggered, that's very common in families. Actually, we have the two extremes in families. On one hand, it's like people's job is to trigger each other. On the other hand, the family members' job is to keep each other not triggered by managing themselves. But you learn this as growing up, that your role is the role of often the peacekeeper. Often your role as growing up becomes the role of keeping peace in the family. So you have to have your own needs and your own authenticity to keep the peace. Because if you don't do that, there will be conflict and that threatens your survival as a kid. And so you got that role. And you got to, and that's a survival strategy, right? And you got the belief that you're responsible for the emotions of others. You're responsible for keeping them happy and not triggered and keeping the family functioning. And so a big part of your healing process will be to let go of that responsibility, let go of that trauma, where you feel that you are responsible for the family functioning and keeping them happy and responsible for their emotions. In order for you to place those boundaries in a healthy way that allows for real connection, and in order for you to heal into your next level, you will need to work with that guilt, to let go of that role of being the peacekeeper and that belief that you are responsible for other people's emotions. And the way that you do that is very simple. It's not by fighting the guilt or suppressing it, it's by welcoming it. Welcome the guilt. Let yourself feel the guilt. You're going to go there, you're going to place those boundaries, and the guilt is going to come up. Especially because your family members will react negatively. Most likely. Even though we don't want that, they will react negatively for sure. Because when you stop playing your old role in the family, there will be pushback, as I was saying. Because your change is disrupting the way that the family systems are working. And so I want you to see that pushback not as failure, but as success, that you're doing things right, okay? And I want you to expect others to become more dysregulated at first. And no one wants that, but that's likely what's going to happen. In the beginning, most likely others will not like your boundaries and will push back and will call you different names and try to make you feel guilty, to cajole you to go back to your old way. Because you're basically, by changing the rules of the relationship, you're exposing them to their emotions. By not being responsible for their emotions anymore, by not taking that responsibility anymore, you are leaving them face to face with their own emotions. You're making them responsible for their emotions, and they're very afraid of that. They don't want that, so they want to make you back the responsible person for their emotions, and there's going to be pushback. And I want you to welcome that as well. If you react to that negatively, that's exactly how you go back to the old patterns and how you lose that fight, which is not a fight, how you lose that transformation. Because you're just allowing yourself to be triggered again by that. That's exactly what they want. They want to bring you back to the negative patterns. And you are avoiding the guilt. If you react negatively, it means that you're afraid of the guilt that they're trying to make you feel. So I want you to instead welcome the guilt, because that's exactly where you need to go to heal. And I want you to expect that pushback, that initial dysregulation, it's part of it. Rarely it might not happen, but most of the times it will happen. It's part of it. And your only job is to keep inner peace inside yourself. Because you cannot control other people's reaction. You cannot control their emotions. You have been trying to do that your entire life and it's not been working well. So even if you could control, you shouldn't want to control. You should only be with your emotions, take responsibility for them, and let others take responsibility for their emotions. And that's why you need to be expecting that and welcome that as a good sign. And just know that's what's important to happen. So I want you to think that your only responsibility in your family will be to keep your own inner peace. And that means placing boundaries and respecting them and letting others react as they need to react and welcoming all of that, including welcoming the guilt inside of you. So when you start feeling that guilt, it's not a signal that you should stop. It's an opportunity to feel safely and to heal into your next level. You should welcome that guilt without buying the story of the guilt. That's the key, okay? So the guilt comes saying, oh, I should actually take responsibility for the others. And what you need to go is to welcome the guilt, welcome the feeling, know where it comes from, know it's trying to protect you, but do not buy the story. Yes, I feel that guilt, and no, I do not need to be responsible for other people's emotions, and let go of managing their reactions. Let go of that. And remember, your only That's your only goal. You only want to think of, my goal is to keep the inner peace. Because until now, you have been trying to keep the outer peace, but at a very big cost. The cost of your inner peace, right? And the truth is, it's actually impossible to have outer peace if there is no inner peace, because the outer world and the outer relationships are always a manifestation of your inner world. So if to keep the outer peace, you need to have inner conflict and be stressed and anxious inside of you, it means that you're never actually going to be able to keep true peace in the family and in relationships. Never. The only thing that keeping the peace does is it keeps the tension in the air. That's the only thing. And it keeps the tension inside of you when it's bad for everyone. The only way that you can actually contribute to real peace in the family is to hold that inner peace yourself. And that's the only thing that I want you to think of success. So if you want to have a measurement of success in your family holidays and navigating family dynamics, is how you keep your inner peace. And the rest, it's not up to you. How they react, keeping harmony, being approved, keeping everyone comfortable and not triggered, that's not success. That's not how you react. Your only job is that inner peace. Remembering that, let's also not go to the other extreme. Sometimes people do that, like, oh, if I only care about inner peace, then I will stop caring about others and just disregard them. That's also just not inner peace. That's just another form of avoidance. And it's the other extreme, and it's not what we're talking about. You still care about others, you still love them, you're just not controlling them anymore. You're just not being responsible for their emotions, but you still care. And you still obviously are caring for them, okay? But your only measurement of success should be your inner peace, knowing that in the beginning, that will usually trigger. And in the beginning, that will usually create some disruption and dysregulation. And that's not failure, that's feedback that whatever you're doing is working and is changing the old dynamics. And what's going to allow for any possible real connection. And so that's exactly it. As you do that, as you set your boundaries, remember not to expect them to even understand. The only thing that you need to expect them and ask them is to respect them. Remember not to try to control their reaction to that, to let them react as they need to react. And your only job is to keep your inner peace, to keep your boundaries, and allow for the connection that is possible. So this is what usually happens. When you start placing your boundaries and being yourself, relationships will change and family relationships will change. And there's a spectrum here. So there is one side of the spectrum where maybe it's actually not possible to have any connection with authenticity because they do not respect your authenticity at all, your boundaries at all. And that's those sad situations where maybe no contact is necessary. To completely distance yourself from that person might be necessary, might be the only healthy thing to do. To actually allow you to continue loving them is to fully distance yourself from them. And in those moments, in those cases, the only thing you can do is to let yourself grieve that relationship. Let yourself feel the grief and the sadness and the loss that comes from that choice and that situation. Let yourself grieve the idea of the loving family relationship that you'd like to have. Let yourself grieve all of that. That's the only healthy way of doing it, because keeping yourself in that relationship, even though it's completely unhealthy, it's going to be the worst thing you can do for yourself. And you don't even have real connection. It's fake connection. So in some cases, that's the case. And it's always a sad. And it's important for you to grieve that. In other cases, it might be quite rare, but there are some relationships where you can be very much yourself, very much authentic. And when you start being more yourself, having more boundaries, maybe at the beginning there's a little bit of disruption, but then there's even more connection. There's like stronger connection. People connect better. And I've seen that happen also, for example, with couples, and they are feeling disconnected and they're afraid of, because they're managing each other, taking care of each other, and they're afraid of like placing their boundaries and stating their true needs and emotions. But when they actually do that, then the connection actually deepens so much more, and they can connect even more with their authenticity. So that's the other side of the extreme, and it's very beautiful when that happens. And it's also not that common in family. So usually family relationships lie somewhere in the middle of that, where there is still some connection that is possible on some levels. There is connection. As you are being authentic, there is some levels where there is connection, and there are some other levels where it's not. And that's where your boundaries need to be set to protect the places where real connection is possible. That's where those boundaries need to be set. And your family doesn't need to understand those boundaries. They just need to respect them. You can tell them this. I would love you to understand. I would love you to understand this. For me, it would make me really happy, but I don't need you to understand it. I just need you to respect that. And if you can respect that, then we can keep the beautiful parts of our relationship. We can keep having some form of connection, because I would love that. But if you cannot respect that, then we cannot keep our relationship. We cannot keep our connection. So you can frame it this way. This might be a way that will help you frame your boundaries, where like, this is what's true for me. I would love you to understand it, but I don't need you to understand it. If you don't, I just need you to respect it. And if you respect it, then we can keep the beautiful parts of our relationship. We can continue being connected where it makes sense. If you do not respect it, unfortunately, we cannot. That's probably the best way that you can frame this. So usually family relationships will stay somewhere in that middle, where there is going to be a form of connection that you can still have, that's still beautiful. You can still connect with them. You can still spend a very good time with them. And there's another part where maybe there isn't that connection, and that's where the boundaries need to be placed. And placing those boundaries is actually what's going to help you stay connected, because with the boundaries, you're protecting your authenticity, you're protecting your choice, your agency, and that helps you stay connected where it's possible. So I just want to let you know, this is possible. This is how it works. For me, it has worked many times this way. In my process, in my change, in my transformation, sometimes my new way of being and my boundaries also trigger my family members, and also there's pushback, there's guilting, there's trying to bring me back to be the previous way. And every time that happens, I try to welcome that without buying the story. So without actually me changing, but welcoming the reaction. I expect it's normal because I'm changing, and still staying firm in who I am and how I work now. And initially there's always some disruption, but I can say that almost every time what happens after some time is that it helps the family connections and the family itself work in a healthier way after some time. As long as you don't go back to taking responsibility for their emotions and you let them take responsibility for their emotions, often after some time people will understand, will readjust, and actually the family becomes healthier. So I have that experience, and I just want you to know that you can do the same. So as you go into the family meeting, as you go sitting at the table this holiday season, just remember this. Your only job is to be yourself. You are not responsible for anyone else's emotions. Boundaries exist to serve connection, not to block it. And then let those relationships settle where they belong. That's your only thing. Your only measurement of success is to keep your inner peace, hold your boundaries, hold your authenticity, and allow for connection that is possible to exist there while welcoming all reactions without managing them, without taking responsibility for them. And that's it. I hope you enjoy this. I hope you take this with you, and I hope this helps you navigate family dynamics even better, with more success, for more healing for you and everyone involved. Not only these holidays, but every year and whenever you have to navigate family dynamics. And see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Talk the Walk. If you enjoyed it, like us and send it to someone who you think will like it too. We love your feedback and interaction, and you're welcome to leave us a comment or review. ask a question, or just reach out. Lastly, if today's conversation stirred something in you, remember, you don't have to walk this path alone. Our Star Soul Skill community is where these conversations continue, where you can connect with others on similar journeys and access to courses and support designed to help you integrate this work into your daily life. You will find everything at starsoulschool.com, and the link is in the show notes. See you next time.